Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Money Date. Our time is precious, but our lives are even more. I welcome you, and I'm excited to be here. My name is Anna, and this is a Money Date. I've been running this show for a year. Very excited. Actually, this month we turn 1 year old. But before I get into the actual discussion of what Money Date is all about, I want to challenge you to think about that. Something that my professor shared with me once is that he talked about the fact that he had a specific trick to happiness, and he suggested to treat hobbies just like you would treat your careers. But his point is that you got to think about on the more important note, because hobbies are one of the most enriching things that we can do in life, and so they do require time and they require money. So I challenge you to think about, what can we do today to gain more time and more money so that we can have that fulfilling and enriching part of our lives? That's the topic for today's discussion. But as you guys know, I'd love to chat about the real piece, right? The real deal that happens on the Money Dates. That is, what do we do from week to week to stay consistent? And I think we have a really good example over the last week of how the Capitals won the Stanley Cup, right? And if you watch hockey, if you're hockey fans, this is really, I never talk about sports. This is actually funny. But I'm traveling this week for work, staying with my dad. And so we were talking about Ovechkin and the Caps, who won last week. And this is one of the things that, wow, it's so easy to watch it, right? Those moments. Hi, Angie. Good to have you here, right? When actually the whole winning moment happens, the game took place, we're all excited. But if you think about how much time was put into and how much effort to get to that moment, right? It's like my husband and I, Yuri and I, were watching, and I had goosebumps. It was just amazing that somebody dedicates their life to consistency. Now, the same message I have for you about your finances, my friends. There's no magic bullet, right? There's not a magic pill you can take. It's really about being consistent and coming back to the very basics. So my reminder for you on every Money Date is to remember 3 things, okay? Number 1 is, where are your expenses for the week? I break it down for you into the very small bit sizes kind of things. Shrink it down. Give yourself a shorter time to stay focused. So if you go from week to week, that's much easier to digest. So how are you tracking your expenses? I don't really have a preference. It's totally up to you. I would like to make suggestions, what works for me, what I see works for other clients. But at the end of the day, it's what works for you, because, my friends, just like winning a Stanley Cup, it's consistency, time from time to time that pays off. So you need to know where your expenses are, okay? There are plenty of tools and apps and spreadsheets you can use. You need to know how much, the second point that I always want to remember, how much money you've made over the last week. I don't care whether you get a paycheck that's coming in every 2 weeks, or you are like me on variable income because you have so many clients, and it depends on that. The number 3 point is that you need to know what your savings goals are. Remind yourself what and how you're staying on track. Those 3 things, my friends, are the foundation of the success that everybody's looking for, but unfortunately don't want to put in the hard work. So with that in mind, we're going to move on and talk about a couple of other things that we do on a Money Date. And so for those of you who are watching this live on replay, drop a comment in the chat. Let me know you're here. I'd love to hear from you. It's awesome. If you're watching it live, say something, because I can see your comments. Also, as I'm going to get into the part where we talk about money wins for the week, let me know what has been awesome for you, because that's only real reason why I want to continue having Money Dates with you, because I have reminders for myself, but I want you to be better with your finances. So as I get into talking about money wins, a money win is a special kind of moment that you take time to reflect upon. But I call it a money win because I believe that everything we do in life is gonna tie into our finances one way or the other. So for me this week, there's actually a couple, but I think the most highlight I've had so far over the last week, I'm traveling all week here in Maryland, DC area. Actually, as a matter of fact, I was in DC yesterday, but unfortunately, today's Wednesday. Yesterday, unfortunately, I did not get to see the Caps, the parade, but caused a lot of traffic. So I was in spirit with them, but was not there actually in person. So, but my bigger sort of and happier moment, I think, is that I visited my brother and his family. And there are 2 kids. I love spending time with Grace and William. William is 2 months old, and he's the cutest ever. And I just can't get enough of the 2 months old. And of course, I love my Gracie. She's fun and exciting to spend time with. So that's the highlight for me. The more I think about it, it's a long commute across the country for what I do. But these kinds of moments, and this is where I'm telling you to start thinking about what are you grateful for? That's really the best approach. These kinds of moments actually give you energy, give you the juice to continue through the hard times. This is kind of fun for me. So that's what I've got for you, my friends. It's actually pretty. It's been a nice couple of days here in Maryland. So, and it's supposed to get even better. Anyway, as I continue on, thanks for jumping on. Hi, Jack. Hi, Julie. Good to have you. Thanks for joining. Awesome to have you. Let me know what your money wins for the week are. So I'm going to get into the actual discussion. The hobbies is a topic that, I frequently have conversations with my clients about what their hobbies are, but it's really kind of like, just sort of brush off sort of conversation. It's like, oh yeah, I play golf, or, my hobby isn't requiring a lot of money. So I want to talk to you about it from the 2 perspectives today. I want to talk about it from the standpoint of money and then from the standpoint of time, because both of these concepts, right, are real and they're scarce. But we are in charge of creating both of them. So if there are things, because I was thinking about this for myself, I can't think of a hobby right now that I'm kind of involved, and I sort of go in phases, right? There are times where I'm particularly involved and interested in pursuing something, and then there are times that it's just sort of, a transition phase, right? Exploring and thinking what I will do. But as I start to think about, all right, could it be more consistent? Could I have more dedicated time, right? Because hobby is something that kind of gets put on the back burner. So as we get into it, I want you to think about how can you create both? Because as I was getting ready to talk to you about this topic, I realized a couple of things. So let me start by actually talking first about time, right? And, I think that if you come from a perspective, then there is a limited amount of time, and what you choose to do with it is up to you, and you're in charge of it. I think that's even better approach. So I'm going to talk about 5 tips I have around the concept of creating time, right, for that. So there are a lot of different things. If you're not defined by what you do 9 to 5, right? If it's not the work that defines you and you have other interests, figure out what it is that one thing you want to focus on. Is it learning another language? Do you want to learn how to draw? My dad's wife, Galina, is into drawing on creating paintings out of this, I don't even know how to describe it, out of silk, right? So like drawing on silk, and then from there she can create scarves and things like that. She was just telling me earlier today about these chairs that she wants to refurbish and do something with it, and it's just like, well, I never have time. So priorities, right? You can't do everything in one shot. So what is more important? And think about, I also started to think that particular times of the year may be more beneficial for some hobbies than others, right? If your hobbies are more outdoorsy and going places, then do those things in the months that allow you to do that. My latest hobby has been that I've spent 2 years studying Ayurveda. I was kind of learned about that. Ayurveda is traditional Indian medicine. It's kind of a holistic approach. Hi, Debbie, good to have you here. It's kind of a holistic approach to sort of mind, body, spirit, kind of a way of living. So it's not even the medicine. So I've done yoga for a number of years, and that's kind of how I got into it. So I decided that I actually wanted to learn more. I learned about cooking. I learned about the actual, use of spices. There's a lot that goes into meditation. So it was fascinating for me, right? So I spent a lot of time. I took classes. I, went to different groups to kind of get to know people who actually do it, because it's not a traditional way of living. So what is that priority, right? And it took a lot of my time, but I devoted it to it. But then I decided that I was going to put priorities the next time around once I get passionate about something. Now, I think what also is important, because we can be scattered all over the place, if you figure out what it is, that thing you want to do, put all the focus and energy into it, because I believe you can have a lot more enjoyment out of it. Number 3, create a to-do list. And this is one of the things that I picked up kind of from a friend, as far as I never had a to-do list for my hobby, right? It was really about, I have the time and I'm going to do it, right? Or I dedicated time going to class and learning something, right? Or practicing. But if I had a to-do list in terms of what tasks and activities went into that hobby, then finding the time, right? And my point number 4 is allocate the time. Maybe it's 15 minutes a day, right? And I'm guilty of that, is that, watching TV for 15 or 30 minutes every evening while I eat dinner kind of translates into maybe sometimes longer. But if I can get away from that and actually devote to the project or the interest that I have, then that kind of goes from not having the time and always thinking, okay, when am I going to get into it, to actually creating it. And then number 5 is give yourself a hobby vacation. I kind of like that, because trying to find 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there, give yourself a day. Like, I know we all take personal days, but sometimes this kind of connotation around personal days have to do with being sick or having to do some chores. So give yourself a time, a personal day or 2 or 3, or if you can take a week to devote to your hobby. Because let's face it, what is the point of this hobby if you can't spend time enjoying it? And that's the guilty feeling that I have, because I have to start thinking in terms of creating the time for it. Because we all have the same amount of it. It's 24 hours a day, but it's up to us, right, to decide how we spend it. So now, what I want to think about next is the second piece, right? And that's the financial aspect. Some hobbies require you to spend initial amount of money up front, right? And let's say you wanted to start a photography class, right? And all of a sudden you need an expensive camera, or you need a camera, but the good ones cost more money. You need to buy the lens, and then there's a course online. Like, you can go on and on and on with what it is that you need to spend money on. And and I'm guilty of that. Like, I can justify the fact, and I can talk Yuri into it and saying, here's the thing I'm really passionate and interested about. I can do a lot of research, get my to-do list of things that I'm going to do, and then come up with the amount of expenses I'm going to have. So the tip number 1 is kind of maybe start out slow. Know that some will require initial money up front. Some hobbies have no expenses, right? It could be just as simple that. Others might be spending that amount that you identify over a period of time. But remember, I talked about in our section about creating time, if you have a to-do list that's specifically targeted for the tasks and activities that you're doing, see if you can list your line items that may be associated in terms of expenses. So if you have your tasks and activities, the next one maybe will be for the expenses that you could anticipate for your hobbies. Maybe it's not going to be anything substantial that needs to be budgeted in, right? I know it sounds like it's more intensive work, right? Just like, oh my gosh, I can't deal with my personal budget, and all of a sudden, Anna, you're asking me to create a budget for hobbies. Yeah, it sounds a little crazy, but if you just step back and say, I really want to do this, right? And maybe as far as the financial piece, because a lot of times what happens is that when we look at our, what our resources allow us, and then we back away from the fact that really want to do it, but my budget, my allowance, or whatever you have, the spending plan does not allow it. I want you to come to it with the fact that it is something that you're passionate about. It is something you want to pursue. Figure out how to do it. It is up to you to create that. So, align your to-do list. Basically, my friends, time and money have to come together. That's it. There's really not a magic bullet or pill that I have for you here. So the goal is not to overspend. That's it, right? So figure out how you can do that. Now, the other thing that I think is helpful is to have a calendar. Now, I talked about that some hobbies, if they require for you to be outside, maybe you're into gardening when it's nice and warm. My dad's wife Galina was showing me her little garden outside on the balcony that she has that she's excited about. Well, she was not doing that in winter months, so I'm sure that there's some cost that went into setting that up, buying the plants, buying the mulch, and all of that. But that's the kind of thing that you get excited about. So I would almost think that you could have a yearly calendar, right, on all kinds of activities and things that you truly enjoy. Maybe in the winter months, there are more stuff that you do inside. Around the holidays, right, you would want to allocate some of your, and that's why I want you from the very beginning, if you noticed, every money date that we've had, and it's been a year in the making, the very first thing I talk to you about is getting your foundation strong. Knowing what your expenses are, knowing what your income is, and not forgetting the long-term plans you have for yourself, which tie into the savings. But if you got that going, if you're on the top of it, having a discretionary dollar, so whatever that is in your spending, to devote to things that you really truly enjoy, how can there be an issue? The only issue there will be if you misuse the time, right? And if you misuse your money. So I want you to think about that. Now, as I always do, I love to close with a quote, but I don't have, this is an anonymous kind of thought, but I thought that it sort of goes well with what we talked about today. So depending on the type of the career or the job you have, you are either defined by what you do during 9 to 5 time, or you can define yourself what you do with the rest of the time that you've got. Could it be your hobbies that allow you to do that? So could it be that you have both and you're lucky? I don't know. But if the hobbies that you have or interests, right, define you as I mentioned at the beginning, that once my professor implied, they're worth fighting for. They're worth working for hard. Thank you so much, my friends, for tuning in. I'd love to know what hobbies or interests you have and how you allocate the time and money. I'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in.